Hey, book warriors! We are here at my house today to talk about Murder at Sea Captain's Inn. We are pre-recording this instead of doing a live chat because I'm traveling. I'm going to see my three oldest boys in Los Angeles. And so I don't know what I will be doing Sunday night tonight when you guys are seeing this. So we're pre-recording. We're going to chat about it and talk about a little book magic.
I wore my beach top to go along with the theme of being out at the Outer Banks.
And we have the background of the lake, so a little water for some atmosphere too.
So it's so beautiful back there. we would actually be out there, except it was rainy and stuff last night. So.
And super muggy.
Mother Nature pooped on our party out there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I love this book. I'm sure you guys did too. Again, it was, a mystery with myth and adventure and just so many different aspects to like. I like the cast of characters, that they're very varied, and there's kind of somebody for everybody. Mm-hmm. I like that. I think it's very fun. But there were some things that just kind of hit my mind on various different levels as I was reading this. So the first thing was the Widow's Walk. And I thought, oh, how cool. I've never been up on a widow's walk, but I've seen them on old houses, out at the beach and stuff. So have you been up on one ever?
I haven't, no. I've never actually been on one, but I always have thought they're super cool too. And just so, just the concept so interesting and kind of so haunting to think that, they're just this way for these people left behind to kind of look out and wait and hope that they see their loved ones out in the distance in the inky blackness of the Atlantic in this case.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because of course my first thought was cool to be up there and kind of as an architectural pretty thing too, but really it's very symbolic for the book about Widow's Walk and exactly what you just said, and because that's kind of their whole family history with the men dying at sea and all that. Right. Are they going to come back? And so that was a very good symbol. Oh, telemarketer's calling me. Go away. Okay, so Salty. Ugh.
Salty Gallagher.
Yeah, when I read that scene, it was kind of like, I could just almost feel Pippin's like, she needed some information, but boy, talking to this person and with such a horrible history.
So spoiler alert, I guess, if you haven't read the first book, or the second one, big spoiler, Salty is not a good guy. Yeah, so Pippin has to go visit him at the Dare County Detention Center while he awaits trial for an old crime. We'll just leave it at that. So not too much of a spoiler, but so that was interesting to write because I had to kind of revisit the crime and what happened in the first book, and then really tap into the emotions that Pippin would be feeling as a result, facing him, and yet what she needed out of him. And he still holds information that he hasn't given her. There's still more. So it was a hard scene to write. And I think any emotional scene is really hard to write.
That's what I was thinking. Cause for people who aren't writers, you may not realize we cry during our sad scenes. We get frustrated during our frustrating scenes. We feel what these characters are feeling. It's kind of like actors. We kind of have to get into that mindset in these scenes. So when I was reading this scene, I was kind of going, oh my God, I knew that it would have been hard for you.
I feel like as a writer, if I cried during a scene that I'm writing where I'm supposed to be crying, or I laugh out loud, I feel like I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
I have succeeded.
Yeah. It's an emotional experience besides just a literary one too. So and if we can make ourselves do that, then yeah.
What do you think erotica writers experience? I don't know if they're doing a good job or not.
Whether they need a cigarette.
Excuse me, honey.
Well, that's what I've sometimes thought about thriller writing. Like, there's only so far I can go with murders in my book because
it takes you to a very dark place.
Yeah, and I don't know that I want to go to that dark place. Oh, I'm seeing like birds flying around back there.
We have our little bird feeder out there.
Yeah, like I think you would have to, and like you think of like Stephen King, like you'd have to have kind of a certain mindset where you want to go into these creepy dark places. And
I wonder if people like Stephen King, if they were not writers, would they be serial killers?
Yeah, maybe
like redirect their urge to kill.
That is a really creepy thing to think about. I'm terrified of the riptides at the coast. Like, I love going to the beach, but North Carolina, I have not been in past my knees because the riptides are bad, and there's always news reports of people getting pulled out to sea and stuff. But luckily, we do have the sound side here. So between the mainland and the Outer Banks, there's this whole sound, and that doesn't get the same problems. But so the riptide scene really scared me. So have you ever had a bad experience in water?
I haven't, but when we went to the beach last year with our oldest son who was visiting, and then Caleb, our youngest, and Carla's and the boys were out in the just in the ocean, and it was October, and Carlos specifically was just kind of like getting further and further away, and then suddenly this guy in a canoe like jumps in the water and starts rowing, and he's like, "You're getting pulled away." And Carlos was like,
we couldn't feel
he didn't feel it at all.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but then he got himself out of it, and because that's what you have to do, right? It's like do nothing, let it pull you out, and then kind of come around. But I worry that you would get too far out that you wouldn't have the energy to come back in. And then I've got kids who surf. And that's terrifying. And they've told me after the fact that they've gotten pulled into riptides, and they have their surfboards, thankfully. So that's a little bit of a safety.
Yeah, that happened to my niece in San Diego. She just moved out there a few months ago, and she had an issue, and she said she remembers my sister, her mom, telling her, whatever you do, to hang on to your board because that'll float. And I think I'm so scared of riptides because I had a really bad experience. We're both from Texas, and a big thing to do there is to go tubing on either the Canal or the Guadalupe River. And
neither of which have I done.
We used to do it year after year after year. When my husband was in graduate school, they would have what they called Graduate Student Appreciation Day. They would appreciate themselves, and they would all take the day off.
That's like senior skip day, right?
Basically, yeah. And so I'd go along with them, but one year, actually, this was not one of those events because I know I had friends there too, and I wouldn't have had friends if it was that day. So I think we just had a group of people that got together. But it had been, record rainfall. So the water was just kind of deceptively smooth, but it was moving. And when we first got on the water, I had a life jacket on. But then I thought, well, this is going to interfere with my tan, right? So I took it off and right
priorities.
Priorities. We were all kind of in this big group with like our legs hanging over, somebody else's tube. So we were kind of a big bunch, going down the river together. And we got to this part where there was just this little incline. And and I was kind of in the middle of the bunch. So the first group went over, and then the water was pulling them in a million different directions. So it kind of stalled them out. And then I was kind of on the incline sideways. Well, then the next group, the water's still pulling them over. So I ended up kind of getting under people and pushed down. And next thing I knew, I was being hurled through the water, hitting boulders. I remember that, I kind of had this moment of clarity that was just protect your head. So I just kind of went like this because I was fighting to try to get up to the top, and it was not happening. So I just went like this. Finally, I just popped up out of the water, and there were some people on the shore that were like, "Where'd you come from?" And I'm just like, "Oh my God." So I was hyperventilating. I had some of those old kids' tennis shoes that I was wearing, and it pulled one of those off my foot that had been tied on my foot. And I know there was something about the shoes I think in here too. And I was terrified. And so I was on the wrong side of the river, and I had to get back to the other side of the river. So I hyperventilated. Curtis was like on the other side, kind of looking around, "Where's Diane?" And he finally came and saved me. We went across, but the whole rest of the group, when they got back, they all had a horrible day. When they got down to the end where they were supposed to get out, it was a bridge that you got out before. They couldn't stop themselves, and they ended up having to go under this bridge. And there was only about this much clearance, so they had to like all jump off their tubes, like hang on to their tube to go under it. And so they were all just like battered and terrified, and we shouldn't have done it. But anyway, that's why sometimes I'm fearful of water.
That's funny. Well, we've
tubed
down the Sacramento River or the American River, and not had any scary experiences because you're just like seriously floating. There's no like rapids or anything where we would go from.
Guadalupe would be like that. In fact, there was even some years where the water was so low, like you'd be bumping along on your butt, and you have to pick up your tube and walk sometimes, So that was an unusual year. But
we had to do that in the Haw River here in North Carolina, where we went kayaking, and there were plenty of times where you're going over these little mini rapids, but there was actually not that much water. So Carlos and Caleb would have to get out and like pull the kayaks forward. Ridiculous.
We haven't been to the Haw, but I've heard it's
nice, fun. So, we'll have to go kayaking.
There's so many interesting names. I guess maybe they're Native American names. Probably. There's like the Haw River, and there's a town Saxapahaw. And
yes, right. Yeah, I can't even. Yeah, they don't say the extra syllable. Saxapaw is what they say, but it's Saxapahaw.
Okay.
Because I was talking to somebody one time in an antique shop saying, okay, how do you say it? Sexabaha? Sexabaha? I know, just Sexabaha. Like, okay.
Yeah. Kind of like Manchac Road in Austin. It's really Manchaca, but they just call it Manchac.
Or Houston in New York, which is Houston. I was like,
Houston,
what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
So another question I had was about the Irish folklore. I found that very, very intriguing. So what drew you to doing that in the book?
Well, so there's this whole curse upon the Lane family that stems back to Ireland in the 1st century. And so a lot of that will be continue to be revealed over the next couple of books. But I mean, Ireland, I love Irish history. I have not been to Ireland, but I'm going to go on a research trip one of these days, especially as I get closer to the end of the series. I just think it's fascinating, and it's not, the Irish mythology is not something, Gaelic mythology is not something that we hear a lot about. You know, we hear Norse and we hear Greek, and so bringing in this Irish mythology just, I don't know, just kind of really worked for the story. And then the more research I did, the more aha things happened. Like I have this whole plot line that developed as I was writing Murder at Sea Captain's Inn, as I was researching the Irish mythology. And there was just this huge aha moment that, oh my God, that ties into this, that ties into that, and it's going to all work together. And it was one of those getting chill moments. So
it's almost like it was preordained.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how it felt when I just randomly picked the name Cassandra for Pippin's mom, and then I looked up what Cassandra meant, and it had something to do with foretelling the future. And,
oh wow!
And I was like, oh my God, that is so serendipitous. Wow. I had no idea, but it just like, that's her name. It came to me.
Your muse was whispering in your ear.
I know. It's so strange the way that happens sometimes.
And it's nice when stories come together like that and you feel like it was kind of a natural process and stuff. It's always kind of fun.
Yeah. So Morgan is the oldest Lane ancestor, and she's the one who was in love with the Roman soldier Titus. And so that's what the lore goes back to, that moment in time. And so, there's this Irish god tie-in to that's going to come about. That's very, very cool. So I don't know. I just think the Irish element is fun. Pretty fun. Yeah.
And I like the whole concept of, all the seas are connected. So it's like, this stuff that happened, even though it was in another country, it's still on the same planet.
Yeah. It doesn't matter because the sea, the water's the water.
Yeah. Think about choosing the books that Pippin uses for her bibliomancy. Are they ones you've read before, or do you kind of go, okay, I need a quote that has something to do with this, and you go search for them? Have you read all these books? That's your quote.
So you mean for the bibliomancy, not the beginning of chapters? Okay.
Well, let's talk about both of them then, because that's interesting too.
So again, it's kind of serendipity. So I was working on Murder in Devil's Cove, and I had used that's that one. Yeah, I had used a different book. I can't remember what book I had started out using, but my youngest son was a high school senior. So this was last year, beginning of the year, and one of the books that he had to read was the Odyssey. And so I have old copies of the Odyssey because I was an English major. And so I have my annotated copy, but he wanted his own copy. But I had pulled out my copy to show him, and he was like, no, can I get a new one? Okay.
That has mommy cooties on it.
Yeah. So got him a new copy, and my copy of the Odyssey was just sitting there on my desk. And, as I was writing, this whole idea of, well, Pippin and Gray's father had been gone for so long. And I just looked at the copy of the Odyssey and I was like, oh my gosh, there's this connection because of Odysseus's travels. And so that was just this moment of, oh my gosh, that's the book I need to use.
Cool.
And so that's how that came about. And then when I was working on Sea Captain's Inn, the lore with Ireland and this Lambay where the archaeological stuff is happening, I had this concept of Devil's Cove, the city, town, island of Devil's Cove, and then this town in Ireland. And so that the idea of the Tale of Two Cities came to me.
Oh,
so not so much about the content of the book itself, but more the title of the book that drew me in. And then when I was thinking about the bibliomancy, just doing a little bit of research about, where did bibliomancy actually begin? and it began, more than 2,000 years ago. But Nostradamus came in and is a known bibliomancer that a lot of his predictions came from the concept of bibliomancy.
Well, I mean, you talk about it in the book, but I didn't know that beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't either, but that's how that came about. So I was like, oh, okay, well, clearly I need to use something from him.
I remember watching a film about Nostradamus, and I can't remember that they showed it to us in school. So so I'm trying to think which class that would have been in. I mean, it wouldn't have been science, I guess, but I'm almost thinking it was in Mr. Savoldi's biology class, but I don't know. But I just found it so fascinating, and I remember like all the things that they could kind of show had come true, and the twisted cross, and that was a swastika, and then I think even JFK's plane crash, wasn't there something that kind of they think. But the towers coming down. I mean,
all of his predictions are so vaguely written, though, that I think like when you go to a palm reader or something like that, or a psychic, it's kind of the same idea that you can take what they say and make it fit.
Find a way.
Like when I went to with one of my best friends in high school, we went to a palm read. I guess I was in college because I was dating Carlos at the time, and I had Carlos's brown leather bomber jacket, and I don't know, we had been dating maybe a year, and Elizabeth and I went to this psychic, and I was like, am I going to marry this guy? And she said, well, I see you with blonde-haired, light-eyed children. And I was like, okay, well, he's Mexican, dark, swarthy. So I guess I'm not marrying you, honey. Sorry.
Can I keep the jacket?
Well, lo and behold, we get married, and our first son is blonde, green-eyed. Carlos has green eyes, and so do several of his siblings. But most of the kids have been blonde when they were born. It was just interesting. So I don't know if there was truth to it or where she pulled that from. But anyway, Nostradamus is. Yeah, they say, a lot of people say that his predictions can be molded to kind of fit anything because they're so big. But
well, that kind of segues into the next question that I had. There was sort of an implication in here that Pippin can interpret these passages kind of different ways, and almost in a sense, not really control them, but maybe take away some of their power or something. So I'm curious about that. Like, is that something? Is that? Am I misinterpreting that, or is that something she's going to learn to control? Maybe.
Oh, well, I don't know. That's a good question about the control. I'm not really sure. It was Gray who really. Okay, so Pippin doesn't know how to be a bibliomancer, and she's never had a relationship with books because her mother always kept books from her, and reading is difficult. She's, it's kind of implied that maybe she's dyslexic or has some, definite difficulties with reading. And so she's learning how to be a bibliomancer, and she's kind of developing this relationship with books. And Jamie's daughter, Heidi, is helping, is a big avid reader. And so they form this little book club. But it's Gray in Murder in Devil's Cove who tells Pippin that you're the one who assigns meaning to the passages that you pick out. So when she opens the book, or, the book falls open, passages will kind of darken and kind of undulate and like lift off, kind of a little 3D effect. So she's not choosing which passages are identified on the pages that open. So in that sense, she's not going to, control like which passages she sees, but what she can control is the meaning that she assigns to those passages. And that's what Gray is telling her, that, who knows if you're right or wrong, because you're the one saying, okay, here's a passage that says, you will find love tomorrow, and
it might be the dog sailor.
Exactly, right? It might not be romantic love, it might be the dog. So you're the one that's assigning that meaning and figuring that out. So, as she develops her bibliomancer skills, I guess, or abilities, we'll just have to see how that unfolds, because she won't control like which passages are speaking to her, just how she manages to interpret them.
Yeah.
And I think as she goes further into the series, she'll have to use a little bit more of her deductive reasoning too, in terms of trying to stop the family curse, which is ultimately the goal.
Yeah. So. When I like the idea that Jamie has these daughters, so that if she decides she's too afraid to risk the curse, by having a child of her own, she could still maybe have the experience of being a sailor. Gives her that chance too.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, okay. Before I get to my last question, I'm going to sneak in another one. So this is kind of a spoiler thing too. So if you haven't read the book, cover your ears, la la la. So I loved how, you know, there were several people there that were suspicious, and they were kind of all working together. Like, I thought that was very clever, because I've never thought to do that in my book, to have, you know, multiple people involved. But then it kind of made sense, like, as you know, she's seeing these people, and then it, you know, putting all that together. So yeah, so I'm just kind of curious about that, about how that came about.
Well, so you and I have very different methods of writing. You're much more of a plotter, right? You start with
I'm the nerd with my spreadsheets.
Yeah, which are very helpful at times. But you start with your, like, you know your victim, you know your crime, you know the villain.
Yeah.
And often I do too, but also equally often it changes.
Oh, wow.
So like, I'm writing the 8th Bread Shop book right now, and I've been waffling back and forth between a couple of different villains, and I've decided, and it's changing, like who I thought it was is changing. So all that to say that I had somebody in mind for the villain, but then as I got further into the writing, I realized that this person couldn't be working alone, that there had to be more. And the fact that Salty revealed, you know, that there are other people kind of in search of this, in search of something, like they don't even know what it is that these people are in search of, that has to do with Morgan and Titus and this lore that goes back 2,000 years that the Lane family is connected to. And so that whole concept lent itself to there being more than one villain, you know, kind of this little conspiracy, because there are multiple people that are after whatever it is the Lanes have.
Yeah,
you know, so
that makes sense. Yeah.
So in this particular instance, it was this group of people working together to kind of move along and figure out what Pippin might be hiding.
Well, and that does kind of, I mean, because this is a bigger story, like when you were just talking about, you know, him talking about, you know, Salty talking about there's more people that are after this stuff. I mean, that kind of is this overreaching arc that goes over the whole series. Right. Normally with cozies, each one is kind of episodic. You know, there's one person who dies, and there's, you know, a handful of people that would want that person dead. But yeah, if it's a bigger overarching thing, which I think is a great way to tie the series together, and that whole adventure, you know, myth and all that aspect, I think is such a cool overlay over the whole thing that totally makes sense.
I really struggled at the beginning of writing this book, because I had this this other sort of mystery that was happening that Pippin needed to get involved. And I was really looking at it more like a traditional cozy series. And I don't think it is. It's got cozy elements, bibliomancy, you know, cozies always have these hooks of baking or crafting or something, bookstore. So it has that element that makes it cozy, but it's also very traditional, and then also very not, because it has the whole magical element. So it doesn't really fit in a box. But when I started writing the second book, I had a different plot that I had started with, and I was really, really struggling. And it wasn't until I had this aha moment of, I am approaching this whole thing wrong, because every book is about stopping the curse, and anything else is secondary to that, you know, and that was a huge mind shift for me that helped me move forward and just really gain a lot of clarity about the whole series, which I was kind of lacking, you know, because I was trying to fit it into a cozy box, and it just didn't fit.
And it was kind of like fighting to get out.
Yeah, it really was. And it was like stalling me significantly. So so a lot of those sort of serendipitous moments that came about as I was researching the Irish lore and stuff like that have everything to do with the big overarching plot of the curse and the 2,000-year-old pact with, you know, this ancient sea god and stuff like that. So it's been so fun to write and explore, and to try, you know, to write a mystery in a different way than what we've done traditionally with cozies.
Well, and I just feel like you have a very, you know, I always want to say adventure, but it's kind of a literary voice, really. It's much more literary than a typical cozy is too. I think too. It's
that could be because of the history elements. Maybe. I don't know. This one was interesting too. We have
in a good way, definitely.
Oh well,
yeah, of course.
Well, we have a mutual friend in our book club, because Diane and I are in a book club, which has not met in forever.
I know, it's so sad.
pandemic book club. Anyway, my friend Nancy, her sister is an archaeologist.
Oh.
And she gave me actually, and her name is Melissa too. And she lives in Oregon, which is where Cora, where Pippin's cousin and all that, that side of the family lives. And so it was just so, again, serendipity, right? What are the odds that I would have a friend whose sister is an archaeologist and living in Oregon and studying something connected to the lost colony? Because I'm fascinated with the lost colony. And now that I live on this coast, I'm even more fascinated. And I really wanted to try and figure out how to tie that in. And then I met Melissa, and she's written a book, which is referenced in this book. Her name is Melissa Darby. And she's studying the lost colony and the Dare Stone hoax in connection with Drake's brass plate. And that hoax, which is on the West Coast, which is Sir Francis Drake, who explored and then supposedly planted his brass plate to claim that land as England's. But it's been proven to have been a hoax by a professor from Berkeley who is supposedly messing with some colleagues, but there's questions about that too. And then two women separately, like 20 or 30 years apart, who realized it was a hoax for various reasons through their research, but were kept quiet. Mm-hmm. And so all of that I found so interesting and worked hard to kind of thread through the book just to give that sort of layer, just because I think it's interesting. So I think other people will find it interesting too.
Yeah. And the manipulation of history and, how can we know for sure, history is a mystery, right? A lot of aspects, because we only know what we can see, or, if somebody happened to write something down, and even that is, interpreted through their viewpoint, a lot of times, unless something's just straight out factual. But
it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And the fact that they still to this day are discovering things that lead them to believe the lost colony survived and that they split off. That was what led to the archaeological dig on Devil's Cove, was that there are, in fact, pretty recently, last year, there was a discovery of some artifacts that led researchers to believe that part of the lost colony did split off and go into the mainland, and they thought there's evidence, and they found later that they think it's Spanish, like ceramics and stuff, and it's too recent for it to actually be lost colony. But there's still this belief that the colonists survived and split off. And so, I have this fictional island, but it's very much based on Roanoke and the continuing archaeological digging that's going on there as they continue to look for evidence that they survived.
Yeah. So my last question has to do with the charcuterie boards. Like, I know you're cooking, and that was like, okay, this is Melissa right here, the charcuterie board. So I love how because we can't help as writers, I think, not to slide in things that just like this. The whole theme of these books are things that interest her. We write about things that interest us, and so
death and taxes.
Yeah. I did find the white collar crime aspect fascinating, not the tax return preparation or advising, but the white collar, because I thought, hey, people are smart. Why are they using their smartness?
Power for good.
Yeah, they should use it for good. So do you want to talk a little bit about charcuterie boards and how you got into that? And
well, so there's this restaurant in Denton, Texas, Hannah's Off the Square. That's the first place I ever saw charcuterie boards. I didn't even know what it was. And it was, it's a collection of meats and cheeses and crackers that they serve. And only got that once. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But then, it became super trendy on Instagram. And really is my daughter, Sophia, who started making charcuterie boards. She and her friends, when she was in Colorado, going to college, they would make, they'd go on a picnic. We would go on a picnic with a plastic grocery bag. Well, they go on a picnic and they lay out beautiful charcuterie boards. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so pretty. And then they've got, Instagram worthy pictures and stuff. And so
I think it's because we grew up without social media, so we weren't worried about presentation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So, so then we got a couple of charcuterie boards, the actual, physical boards for Christmas.
Is it different than just a
cutting
board?
You can do it on anything, but we happen to get ones that are supposedly, specifically for charcuterie. But no, you could do it on anything. Traditionally, it means an array of meats. in French.
Yeah.
So it's evolved into meats and cheeses and olives and nuts and chocolate and, just this sort of beautiful display of little fingery type foods. So we made it at Christmas, and so we had, that tray of all the little things, and then another one with a melted brie with a jam on it. And I don't know, just sort of started there. And so then when I was thinking, I just needed Pippin to make something, like to have something for this event that she was going to be hosting at the inn. And charcuterie came to me, and then the whole cheese shop came to me, and then Colette, the cheesemonger, came, who I love, and she's the one that leads Pippin to Nostradamus, and that becomes key, and she's going to be a great recurring character, I think. And so it just kind of comes about when it's in your head, and then suddenly you pull it out to apply to something specific. I don't know, but I enjoy making them, and I made a video on my YouTube channel of making a charcuterie, which was fun too.
Well, I love that, because it's fun, when we can share something that we find interesting, with the group. Because like my next house flipper book, stained glass plays into that, and I've just recently reactivated my stained glass hobby and discovered I really stink at it. So I need some work, but yeah, it's fun to kind of put those things in there and maybe introduce somebody else to it too. Like now I'm kind of going, all this charcuterie stuff, and you had the kind of how to do it at the back. I thought I'm gonna have to try this some night.
I love it for dinners. And trying to get my husband to need less meat and potato kind of meals and more like let's graze kind of meals, with a glass of wine and maybe a movie or something. We'll have you guys over and we'll do charcuterie. How about that?
Was it Sophie that made the one that one night when we were over here? It was so good. It had like this fig jam.
Yes. Yeah.
And then some kind of cheese. Yeah, it was good. It had all kinds of.
She's all about the artiness.
Yeah. That's fun.
So it's fun. And then we've done it a bunch of times for dinners, and just with the kids and I, when Carlos has been fishing. My husband goes on overnight fishing trips, so we'll do charcuterie. Carlos isn't home. We don't have to do like meat and potatoes. Let's do charcuterie.
It is fun when you can turn food kind of into art too.
It just makes it fun.
It does, yeah. It makes it so much more fun than just stuff on a plate like I cook.
My husband, Carlos, and the kids were out of town, and my neighbor's family was out of town. So we got together, had drinks on the porch, and I made a little charcuterie board, and it was just so fun. Yeah, it's just it's like a fancy moment at home.
Yeah,
which kind of elevates your let's have a drink.
Yeah, especially during COVID. It's like we need to find these ways to make being home more special, or just the events, or because it's really easy. Like I've gotten so lazy about things. Lazy about makeup and hair and clothes and cleaning and
Hey, well, this is my Goodwill shirt from Asheville.
It's really cute. Super cute. Well, thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys. If you haven't read them, here they are. Go get them. Okay, so stay tuned. We will announce September's book club book soon, shortly.
Bye, guys.
Bye.